Richard.
And this is an evening with Kenneth and Richard. Tonight we will be discussing the Treaty of Paris 1783.
And why it did not prevent further conflict between the U.S. and England.
In part 1 of our PBS special tonight, we will be discussing the Revolutionary War and the events leading up to it.
The first English colony in the New World was Plymouth Colony, founded 1620.
Many more colonies were founded along the eastern coast.
England and America were rubbing elbows for some time.
The main reason for this friction was the taxation of the colonial people without representation.
I thought it was tyranny.
Indeed. This act of tyranny caused the American people to revolt, resulting in famous acts like the Boston Tea Party.
Finally, the Americans had had enough, and the Revolutionary War began. 1775.
Followed by the American Declaration of Independence in 1776.
Many people do not know this, but the Revolutionary War was fought between Great Britain versus the U.S., France, and Spain.
The combined troop and militia total of the United States, France, and Spain was just under 260,000.
England had a combined total of 112,000 troops and militia. A near 2-to-1 ratio.
Finally, the war ended in 1783 with the Treaty of Paris.
This concludes part 1 of our PBS special.
An evening with Kenneth and Richard.
This is PBS. This is PBS.
Welcome back to part 2 of our PBS special. An evening with Kenneth and Richard.
In this section, we will be discussing the Treaty of Paris and the War of 1812.
The Treaty of Paris ended the Revolutionary War in 1783.
It was signed by many people, including Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, and John Adams.
The Englishmen who signed it wished not to be known.
That is why, in the famous painting by Benjamin West of the signing of the Treaty of Paris is unfinished, because they refused to be recognized.
The official treaty was signed in 1783 in Paris.
The unofficial treaty was signed earlier that year.
The first thing on the treaty was the recognition of the 13 states as free and sovereign states.
That meant when England signed the treaty, they had to recognize America for America.
For a while, there was no conflict between the United States and England.
Until the War of 1812.
This war was started because America wanted and tried to invade Canada, an English territory at the time.
Other causes of the war were trade tensions.
Impressment
and questions of U.S. expansion.
And this concludes part 2 of An Evening with Kenneth and Richard.
This is PBS. This is PBS. This is PBS. This is PBS.
Welcome back to part 3 of An Evening with Kenneth and Richard.
In part 3, we will be discussing exactly why the Treaty of Paris did not prevent further conflict between the U.S. and England.
First, we will read the treaty. Part 1 of the treaty says, the 13 colonies of America are to be recognized as free and sovereign states.
Part 2, establishing boundaries, U.S. and British North America.
Number 3, granting fishing license to fishermen in the Grand Banks.
Part 4, recognize lawful debts to be paid on either side.
Number 5, the Congress of Confederation will recognize the rightful owners of all confiscated land that has been given to British loyalists.
Number 6, the U.S. will prevent future confiscations of property belonging to loyalists.
POWs on both sides will be released. Property of Great British Army will be unmolested.
Number 8, Great Britain and the U.S. were each to be given perpetual access to the Mississippi River.
Part 9. Territory captured by American subsequent to treaty will be returned without compensation.
Ratification of the treaty was to occur within 6 months from signing by contracting parties. The treaty was less of a war treaty and more of a way for Great Britain to recognize the U.S. as a free and sovereign state.
So it meant it was not about peace, but about the U.S. being free.
And this is why the Treaty of Paris did not prevent further conflict between the U.S. and Great Britain.
And this concludes tonight's episode of An Evening with Kenneth and Richard.